my privilege to introduce a global thought leader, an educator, a change maker. Yes, I'm talking about Dr. Byron L. Ernest, founder and Chief Positivity Officer, Leadry Global USA. He is going to express his views today on Wowful Leadership, merely living service, character, and presence daily. Dr. Byron Ernest was the 2010 Indiana Teacher of the Year and 2011 Christopher Columbus Foundation Outstanding National Agri-Science Teacher. As a globally recognized speaker and facilitator, Byron founded Leadry Global to offer customer-tailored experience, speaking, and consultative packages for clients in education and other industries all around the world. Through his professional service firm, he's tackling the most important international issues related to education. Please put your hands together as we invite on stage Dr. Byron L. Ernest. Can we have a resounding applause, ladies and gentlemen? Well, Dr. Byron, it's so good to see you here. Welcome to Manila, Philippines. How are you feeling right now? Are you excited?
I'm very excited. I'm ready to go.
So are we. What a shoo! Getting the right vibe here.
Thank you so much. It is so exciting to be here. Can I get you, you're going to find the old teacher in me is going to come out during this. Can I get everybody to stand up for a moment? And if I could have your permission, which I'm pretty sure I do with all the cameras, phones, and everything else out, I have got to take a selfie, okay? And because I've learned how to take a selfie, I used to ask people to take selfies for me, and then my son kept telling me it's not a selfie if somebody else takes it, right? But anyway, we're going to take one. If I can get my phone here to do what it's supposed to do. All right, here we go. Okay, I need everybody to, on the count of 3, will you please wave like you really like being here, okay? So, on the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh, I like that. I'm pretty sure that when we first started, the B group won. Not that I'm competitive in that, but the A group came through for me on that little deal. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. But it is such an honor to be with you this morning. And it's interesting, all the things that everybody has said so far really were a great segue to what I'm going to talk about. And I've always said that if I was agile enough to write a segue, it'd be fun to come in with one after somebody has segued, right? I don't think that would be a good thing for me probably to do. But today, we're going to talk about Wowful Leadership, what I call Wowful Leadership. And we're going to spend a little bit of time just this week. I've got a new book that came out. And thank you very much. Mere Leadership. And I'm going to talk about that here in a moment because that's where a lot of this is founded from merely living service, character, and presence daily. Doesn't that sound like some of the things that were already talked about, right? So kind of exciting that all works out well for us. And so if we think about this, and I have to tell you where this all came from. This came from me being the deer. Oh my. There we go. The deer in the headlights. You know, there are a lot of leadership theories. There are a lot of processes. There are a lot, like there's octopus leadership now. There's T-shaped leadership. There's all these theories. Today is not about theories with me. Today is about, you're going to hear the authentic thoughts from a guy that's been the deer in the headlights. The guy who taught in the classroom for 29 years. The guy who, when our state of Indiana decided that we were going to take over our worst failing schools because every child deserves a great school, guess who they gave the worst one to take on? Me! That's what I looked like, people. That's what I looked like, was that. I've experienced having to start out with a whole new staff, having to build culture and be able to love our people. I love that the word love came up several times. You're going to hear me talk about that because I so believe that we need to love people. And so when we think about this, I'm still messing this up. So when we think about this, it's really about recentering leadership. And so I've got a question for everybody in the room. Who in this room is a leader? Okay, now I'm concerned because everybody's not raising their hand. And I'm pretty sure this is a leadership conference, right? But I would argue, and I really would argue this, because this all comes down to one of my core beliefs, and that is that everyone is a leader. Everyone is a leader. Hear me say that because that is crucial to what I'm talking about today. That is crucial to what we're going to hear in these next 2 days as far as I'm concerned. Everybody's a leader. Everybody has a responsibility to lead from where they are. When I was a first-year teacher, I had a responsibility to lead from where I was. When I was a principal of a school that we were turning around, I had responsibility to lead from where I was. I also had the responsibility to be human-centered. Are you seeing why I loved all the stuff that was talked about before? Because we talked about the human part, right? And I love thinking about us as human beings, human-centered, because our role as leaders is to make sure that our people are ready to be leaders, that everyone can be leaders. That means we have to have them prepared with the technical knowledge that we need. That means we have to have them prepared with the emotional intelligence that it takes to be able to do that. They have to know how to work with humans. It's our responsibility to do that. So everybody's a leader. We have to be human-centered. And then we have to remember that leadership begins with service. I think we've really lost track of the word leader. We a lot of times say, well, she's a leader, and that's supposed to mean that it makes them great in some way. Not really true, right? I prescribe, and my UK friends that I just met, you'll love this, I prescribe to the Old English definition of leader, which means to guide or bring forth. Think about if thank you. I feel like I'm preaching, man. You're like, hey, yeah, all right. Amen. You can do that. Can you tell I loved teaching, right? And I loved students like you. But to guide or to bring forth. Think about if every leader did that. And I hope you all will think about that and reflect on that as you leave here. How are you guiding and how are you lifting up? Because leadership, before it's about authority, titles, and all the stuff that we think about, it's really about how do we care for people, right? And what I call loving people. That's really, really important. So, what does mere leadership mean? I've got to tell you a story. Where mere leadership came from was my favorite author in the world, and I would encourage you to check it out, is Patty Callahan Henry. Patty Callahan Henry is a phenomenal historical fiction writer. And by historical fiction, she turns history into novels that we actually can understand and are interesting, right? And it's always very fact-based, so she has that in that. And I've read them all, and she had two that really inspired me. And one was called Once Upon a Wardrobe, and the other one was called Becoming Mrs. Lewis. And they had C.S. Lewis. She has C.S. Lewis as the main character in those books. And I, as a huge C.S. Lewis fan, from a Chronicles of Narnia to a Mere Christianity. Are you seeing the connection here? And mine is not a religious book, but we'll talk about where Mere comes from. She really inspired me to want to follow and be where C.S. Lewis was. I wanted to spend time at the kilns outside of Oxford, where he lived. I wanted to spend time at Oxford, where he was a Don, and at Cambridge, where he was a Don. And so I found that the one way you can do that is to become a scholar in residence with the C.S. Lewis Foundation. And then they actually put you in classes at the University of Oxford. And I'm like, I'm too stupid to be in classes at the University of Oxford, right? But lo and behold, I got accepted. And I spent 3 years doing this project and living part-time, not all time during the 3 years, at the kilns in Oxford. Pretty cool, my UK friends, right? To get to do that. And to get to write. So this book was written in the same office where C.S. Lewis wrote the Chronicles of Narnia. That still gives me chills, right? Now, I am not comparing myself to him, right? There's no way. But that's still pretty cool, right? And then I have to share, the other thing I have to share, because this all makes a connection. So one, Patty Callahan Henry was significant. If you're worried that I'm going to step off, I might. So if you could catch me, because it won't be pretty. But Patty Callahan Henry was significant in that she gave me that desire to want to do that. Is that leading? Sure is. Guiding, bringing forth, right? We go back to that. And then Patty read the manuscript. Because we have actually become friends. Those that have been watching, I'm kind of a social media butterfly. And she had caught it, and we'd become friends. She read the manuscript. She said, Byron, this is actually pretty good. I'm like, I don't like the way you just said that, actually pretty good. Did that mean that you thought it was going to be terrible, right? And she's like, well, no, but it's pretty good. And she said, I would really like to write the foreword to it. Well, how cool is it when you can get a award-winning, whatever the heck she is, like really good writer, right, to write the foreword for a book? Well, she did. Well, then my publisher, and they think I'm a total buffoon, and they're probably right. They're like, what do you got for ideas for the cover of this book? I'm like, I've got this painting that I did. And I'm not an artist by any sense. But the artwork that is the cover, you're looking at the cover, I did that. Now, the connection, so I'm going to make the connection for you. That is what they call splatter art, right? You literally pick 4 colors, you get a brush, and they put you in a plastic bag, and you're slinging paint at this. And we did this for a leadership training development that I do with teachers, and you know, that painting stressed me out. And for the guy who normally, people who know me know that I am totally comfortable being uncomfortable. I am that person. I do not have to have things figured out before we start. I can build a plane while it's in the air. I can even repair it while it's in the air, right? I'm one of those people that if I'm in a meeting with you, I'm going to say, let's do something even if it's wrong. Right? Because then we can actually correct and know where we are with that, right? But this stressed me out because now listen to this. As leaders, everybody's a leader. Listen to what I'm going to tell you. This stressed me out because I looked and I'm like, do I need another color in there? Do I need another horizontal slash? When I analyze it, I think I got too many horizontal. But anyway, do I need another vertical? And then the real question came, am I done? Think about that as a leader. Am I done? Why this became so important for me to have as the cover is because we are never done as leaders. And it is okay to be uncomfortable with, could I do more? What could that more be? What could I learn? What can I be curious about? What can that happen? This is such an apt metaphor. And I want you to take that away in your mind that we aren't ever done. And it is okay that the only parameter we have is the canvas itself, right? And then we have to decide where are we in the process, right? And so I'm excited to share that with you. And so, as I mentioned, C.S. Lewis wrote a book, Mere Christianity. Really cool book because the premise is that we actually put a lot of crap on ourselves and make things a lot more difficult than what we are, that they need to be. And so his premise was, I'm going to write a book about what's it mean just to be a mere Christianity or mere Christian. This is not a religious talk. I'm like, gosh, that's pretty cool. What's it like just to be a mere leader? Because sometimes we put a lot of stuff on this, clutter it up like a splatter art. What would the mere pieces be? Then what I found in the book, Mere Christianity, he talks about justice. He talks about grit. He talks about a lot of the things that we talk about in leadership, right? And so I took some of those things. So the word mere takes us back to what's essential. And again, leadership is service. It isn't about prestige. Now, I realize that we're here, there's cool awards, and there's cool trophies and all that stuff. That's really cool. But is it really about that? No, right? It's really about the connections that we're going to make. I'm excited to be making connections here. And those relationships are so important. I'm going to talk about those. And then leaders don't seek privilege. They take the burden. Right? And there is a burden. Let me tell you, folks, if you ever have the opportunity to take over a failing school, do it. And wow, no different than taking on a failing company, right? Or something that needs to be turned around. Yeah, it is not fun at times, and it is a burden, but wow, that was some of the greatest work. Those teachers that I worked with during that time are still some of my best friends to this day. And so that's what mere leadership means. And it's about love. I said it was about love. C.S. Lewis wrote another great book, The Four Loves. And I think leadership fits into one of those really well, and that's agape love. And agape love means charity, which means how are we helping others? And I love Ashley Montague's. If you've never seen this definition of love, I had to put it up here because it is my favorite definition of love and what I think we should strive to do every single day with everybody that we are associated with. And that is profound involvement in the well-being of others. Can I say that one more time? Profound involvement in the well-being of others. Right? If you think about somebody who's been a major impact in your life, they did that, didn't they? They did that. Now let's talk about the three anchors. Three anchors of mere leadership that are going to help a person be wowful. Those are accountability as care. Those are holistic empathy, seeing the whole person. Every one of us in here is a human being. Every one of us in here comes from someplace different. Every one of us in here has had different experiences. That is so cool because guess what? That makes us all human and unique. And wow, can we be pretty cool all together with all those things, right? And then presence. Presence, to me, is the one leadership attribute that nobody really ever trains for. And we're going to talk about that here in a moment. So let's get started with accountability. My photo over here is from London at the Florence Nightingale Museum. So Patty Callahan Henry, who I mentioned, also wrote this great book that's an Audible classic, Wild Swan, which is about Florence Nightingale. And so then I became a fan of Florence Nightingale, right? Florence Nightingale, our Lady of the Lamp, or Lady with the Lamp, she is known for accountability, right? And accountability, when I say the word accountability, I actually saw some people cringe when I said accountability, right? Because we think about micromanaging, blame, and all those things that come with accountability, right? Her view on accountability was it's merely about we need to be clear. And it's also about caring enough to have accountability. Florence Nightingale, the Crimean War, she decided that she had a calling that she wanted to really think about how do we improve healthcare and nursing. And they were in a very controversial war at that time. It's kind of interesting that we're in one of those situations here right now, right? So I looked to her for guidance. She decided that she was going to embed herself in the hospitals that were on the front line. This was a leader who was truly present. She went and became a nurse. She didn't just lead from afar like some people do. She actually embedded herself. She started to look at data. She was really the innovator. All the cool data stuff that we now have where we can do graphs instantly and cool visual stuff. I have no idea how to do it, but people can do this. But all those Venn diagrams, all those things like that happen, she was really the founder of all that because she learned that if she was going to make change in Parliament, she needed to be able to make the data so that the people could actually understand it, right? It's kind of like in my role, I have a policy role as a State Board of Education member, and I know for our legislators that I really have to dumb it down, right? And I say that lovingly because, one, I know they're not going to read it and disaggregate it themselves. So I have to be able to do that for them. And she was our person who did that. So her example that I want you to take away is, one, she was truly present, went and was there. She was shoulder to shoulder with the people doing the work. If nurses were talking about what wasn't going well, she knew it because it wasn't going well for her either, right? Segard, we had that conversation earlier, didn't we? It was going, she learned how to figure it out because she was right there with them. And so that's our example. That's accountability that really cares. Not the kind of accountability that we think about. It's the accountability of how are we going to figure out how to make a difference. Now, I love that somebody brought up Sister Teresa because you'll notice I took this picture at the Florence Nightingale Museum as well. I love this because we've got Princess Di on one side, Sister Teresa in the middle, and Florence Nightingale on the other side. Now, if that's not examples to live by, I'm not sure what is, right? I'm not sure what is. But Florence Nightingale really brought up this concept before it was cool to talk about of holistic empathy. And that is seeing the whole person. That's what she called it, was seeing the whole person. To sit down next to a patient in a hospital and find out what was going on with them to see how we might make things better, right? That's seeing the whole person. And I loved, through my studies at Harvard, I learned the 3 types of empathy. And I think these are important for people to understand. The first, cognitive empathy, then emotional empathy, and empathic concern. And they're all just a little bit different. And I think for leaders to be really, really good at what they do, we need to understand the difference in them. And so when we start with cognitive empathy, that is, you can understand another person's perspective, you can understand their context, right? It's kind of like, what was one of the first things that somebody asked you when you came in this room? Where'd you travel from? How long did it take? How'd your flight go? Did anybody get asked that question or what have you, right? Okay. We have cognitive empathy because all of us in this room had to travel from somewhere, right? And we all understand what it's like to travel. We all understand to hear what it's like of, gosh, we appreciate your patience, but we're going to be delayed by another 2 hours, right? Now, little word of advice. Become the happiest person in the airport, because you get all kinds of stuff when you're the happiest person, because nobody else is, right? But we can understand that. We can understand when somebody talks about having to get themselves ready to be gone for 3 or 4 days, right? Yeah, we learn how to do that. I raise dairy cows at home, people. I have to really be ready to leave and have somebody take care of them when we're gone. You weren't ready for that, were you? That I have dairy cows. There's my little thing that was in there. But we have that cognitive empathy. We have that cognitive empathy. Now, when somebody starts to talk about that, well, I came on my private jet. I'm not there. Never been on a private jet, probably never will be on a private jet, right? That ain't going to happen. So then we have emotional empathy. And a person that I got to be good friends with, Daniel Goleman, who is kind of he's in his 80s now, but he is the eminent emotional intelligence person, if you look that up. And I love his emotional empathy definition, and that is that when you feel physically along with another person. Think about that, right? When you feel physically along with another person as though their emotions were contagious. I use the example that I have lost both of my parents. And, every day it comes down to, I'm like, man, I don't have any parents anymore, right? So when someone loses a parent, I have emotional empathy. I've gone through that. Does that mean I understand everything exactly in their world? No, I don't. But I do understand, I can feel the pain because I've been there, right? I can feel the pain. That's important for us to remember as leaders, right? And I'll give another example of that here in a moment. And then our last one, and this is where we can really become significant in other people's lives. Empathic concern. This is where we really have awareness, and it's also where we can actually do something, which Sister Teresa would tell us is compassion. Empathy without compassion, we don't do anything. I can feel what you feel, right? But we can actually do something. So I have to tell you about one of the great leaders that I had early in my teaching career. His name was Mr. Watson. He and I still get together to this day. And my 3rd year of teaching was when I lost my father. He was diagnosed with cancer. 6 months later, he had passed away. Mr. Watson had lost his wife the year previous to the same cancer. Now, I realize cancers don't always act the same with everyone, but they were pretty close. And Mr. Watson always knew exactly what I needed. And there were always those times, if you've ever been through something like that, there are times when the hospital calls you and they're like, hey, you need to come in. We're really close to the end. We want the family there. You need to be there, what have you. That happened like 6, 7 times, right? We'd go and do that, and then it was, I was glad that it didn't, but yet I'd come back to Mr. Watson and I'd be like, I am so sorry that I've been out of school. And I felt bad for my students, right? He's like, Byron, I have your back. You go do what you need to do. I've got you on this, right? Years later, I realized, and I realized it at the time, but years later I asked him, because I really got to thinking about it. During that time, I never had a day counted against me, like a sick day or what have you. And I wish we could go back to times like that. I asked Mr. Watson about that, and he said, you were a 3rd-year teacher. You had much more to worry about than whether you had days available and what have you. I took care of that. Thank you for the amen on that, right? I tell that, and thank you for that. I tell that story because while I realize that things have changed and sometimes we can't do things like that, even though I think we should, individualized, because we're all unique and human, right? But I tell that because Do we know our people well enough to know that, right? And I think to right toward the end of my father's life, he got at one point to where he didn't know who I was. We couldn't have conversations, what have you. Can you imagine me not being able to have a conversation with somebody, right? It was not good. Well, the doctors put him on these steroids, and all of a sudden he got better, right? He knew who I was. We were having these great conversations. Mr. Watson pulls me in. He's like, Byron. He's like, I got to tell you, we went through this with my wife. That's going to be good for about 4 or 5 days, and then he's going to be right back where he was. So he said, enjoy it. But he said, I'm telling you, it ain't going to be that way forever. And you know what? He was right. Now, why do I tell that story? He knew me well enough to know that I could handle that. Would that be something you would tell everybody? Probably not, right? But he knew me well enough to know that I could take that. That's where that relationship comes in. If we're really great leaders, we have relationships with our people to know what's going on, right? And I think that's really, really important when we think about this. Now, presence. This is the one that nobody teaches, right? Present. We talk about presence like, hey, be there, show up, right? Show up, hey, everybody, I'm here, right? Pretty egotistical when you think about it. Presence is so much more than that. Presence is about being accessible. And I don't mean accessible like a lot of people also do this thing where they're like, hey, I have an open door policy. I always think when somebody says that, it means really you don't, right? You're just telling me that, but do you really have that? You know, I'm getting closer, aren't I, to coming off the edge. And then I had a teacher leader, about the time I was starting this project for Mirror Leadership, she said, in one of my developments that I do with teachers, she said, you know, it's about being available. And now I use that word a lot. And I said, Kristen, what do you mean by available? And she goes, well, my first year's teaching, my social studies department head, he was available. My team was available. Anytime I had a question or something I needed to work, they were there. They were there for me. They even answered my questions before I even knew I had a question. I said, that's kind of cool, right? I wish people could do that for me. But available. Are we available? That's what presence is. I go back to Florence Nightingale. Was she available? Yes, because she was side by side. She knew what her people were going through. She was available for them. So as leaders, we have a responsibility to be available. So let's tie this together. If we're going to be wowful, how do we put these mere leadership attributes together? 1, significance outlives success. These next 2 days, we're going to see a lot of success factors. And that is, people are going to be up on this stage getting awards. Is that important? Yes, it is. Not taken away from that. Is it the most important piece? No, it is not. Right? No, it is not. Cedric, I told you I was going to put you on the spot. Will you just walk up to here for a minute? We're really good friends. We met this morning. That's actually not true. We met a little ahead of time to be ready. Think about the greatest leader you've had in your life. Were they successful or were they significant? They're giving you a mic. I don't even have to hold mine down. Were they successful or significant? Maybe both, but because you say they're great, were they successful or significant?
Very significant. The greatest leader in my life is my cousin, who's about 4 years older than me. And I thank him every day for the man I am because I got to watch him model what integrity looks like, what hard work looks like, and all that. So it was extremely significant in my entire life. I reference my cousin Keith.
Let's give it up for Cedric. Thank you. And that was not planned either, was it? You could tell he was having to think about that. That is significance. That's what it's about. Yeah, we want to be successful. I've always said I've reached a point in my career where I don't care about that part as much as I do about being significant. I really want to think about how have I changed other people's lives, right? That's wowful. I want somebody to say, wow, I'm better because Byron was there. Byron was present, right? And so that's what we're looking for. Then the other one, we got to be human first and expert second. I've gotten to where I don't even like the word expert anymore because I'm not even sure what that means. And things change so fast that how do you even know if you're an expert, right? I'm pretty sure I'm not in anything. But what I can say is there's lots of expertise in this room. So let's take advantage of the expertise, but let's also not forget we're humans first, right? Let's take advantage of the human part, that unique part that we have. And then experts tell, humans connect. Again, I go back to the relationship piece. Relationships, that is the most important piece of this. And I even think about the next 2 days. How can we build relationships with each other? How can we connect? So now as I pull this together, George MacDonald. I don't know whether if any of you have ever read George MacDonald or not. He was a major influence on C.S. Lewis. And he wrote a book in 1880 called The Diary of the Old Soul. Diary of the Old Soul. And he was a genius for being 1880s. He had his publisher on the opposite of every printed page put a blank page. Because his vision for that was, as people read the book, they ought to put notes in there. I'm like, how cool is that, right? How cool is that? So, when I did my book, at the end of each attribute is what I call an attribute mirror, where I ask some things, and there's some places where people can write and reflect. I'm a big reflective person, right? I like to reflect and think back. But here's what I want to close with you all. I want you to think about what's been said, but I want you to think, instead of asking what position do I hold, ask who or how am I serving? Right? Doesn't matter about the position. Who or how am I serving? Instead of asking, do people follow me, ask, do they trust me? Think about that. Think about that. Because to really follow you, they've got to trust you. But are you leading with character? Are you doing the right things? And then, probably the third and most important, am I truly, and who might I be overlooking, being available for? If you don't leave here with anything except thinking about, who can I go back home, or even someone here, who can I be available for? Will the world not be a better place if we all thought about that, right? Who can I be available for? So let go of what leadership's supposed to maybe look like and what a lot of people think and all those theories and things that are out there. But what's it look like if it's human and grounded and lived with purpose and clarity, and that we're just all there for each other? That's what we need to be thinking about. That's what Wowful Leadership is all about. And I have this up here, the QR code as I close out. Up here is my contact info. I'm hoping these chairs aren't in the way. They'd probably get mad if I just threw them out of the way. But if you can get to it, that's the book. And we've actually, I have to, my little disclaimer, I made them make the prices be low for a while so that I could do these kinds of things and be like, you could go in and do, like the Kindle version is like $3 or something. So if you're so inclined, that's my only little sales pitch, right? And it's not really a sales pitch, it's just that I want you to see the cover and stuff, right, that I'm telling you about, and the mirror leadership part. I just want you to know, one, I'm excited to get to know each and every one of you. Excited to be here. Thank you for being so engaged. I love the fact that so many of you were doing these things, and you were wonderful, right? Thank you for that. Thanks for having me, Fluxx. Loved being here, and with that, I'm out.